And so when you ask me what's something I'm proud at when I look back on, it's times when I took the journey more serious and I took the time with the staff and the volunteers to lead that through them, keep the vision front and center and the experience in the background. I think those have been the most rewarding holiday seasons for me, where I can look back and say, yeah, I don't even remember what the experience was. I don't remember what we were preaching on. It may have been Paul. I don't know. But I do know everyone participating leading up to it felt honored, and they realized who they were honoring.
Well, hey there, friends. Welcome to the Missional Marketing Podcast. I'm Bart Blair, joined by Jason Hamrock, and we are just delighted that you've tuned in with us today. Jason, I'm glad that you agreed to hang out with me via Zoom today.
Well, thanks, Bart. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Although we're recording this before New Year, so it feels a little weird to say that. But by the time this drops, it will be 2022. 2022.
Yeah.
2022. That's hard to say.
I don't know where time goes, but my goodness, we're already into the new year, and it seems like time just flies by. We have so much going on. Just God is good. We're just busy around here. I'm sure you are, as you're listening to this, that ministry never slows down. It just seems like it speeds up faster and faster and faster, right?
Absolutely. So if you're listening to this, you're probably still maybe breathing the fumes of Christmas. Take a deep breath. We hope that you are ready to start looking forward to the new year. In fact, our episode today is all about Easter. Well, it's not all about Easter. We talk about some Christmas planning and some Easter planning, sort of big event planning. But we have a great guest. His name is Ben Stapley. And Ben has a pretty extensive ministry experience. He's recently taken the position as the executive pastor at the Life Christian Church in New Jersey. But he's served in a couple of other large churches as the experience director, doing creative things and really helping plan large scale events such as Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, Ben and I, we really go deep into this because it seems like whenever, I don't know if you Bart, being a pastor for a long time, and you as you're listening to this, every year it's almost like, where did the time go? Christmas just snuck up on us, right? Or I can't believe it's already Easter season, and I think what Ben's saying is, hey, when it's coming up, you want to plan accordingly. You want to build some time into your plans. And so today you're going to learn a lot of cool strategies that we share. And we talk about this because it's literally not too long from now is going to be Easter, and it's April 17th this year. And so, it's not too late, but you really want to get going on this if you haven't taken the time to think through all the creative strategy and let your mind just let God speak into that. Let him put some stuff into your head about how to reach more and more and more unchurched and dechurched people this Easter season. So I'm excited for you to hear it.
Absolutely. It's a great podcast. Ben shares some really interesting insights based on his experiences. And I think those are some of the best insights that we can take away. Some of the experiences that he's had haven't all worked out the way that he expected and hoped, and some of them did. And so he shares some of those things with us. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast. We know you have options about what you do with your time, and the fact that you'd spend time with Jason and me means a lot to us. If you haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, we hope that you'll do that on whatever platform it is that you listen or watch. And if you haven't ever left us a rating and review, we would love to have a rating and review, just because it helps more people find this content, whether it's on YouTube or on one of the podcast broadcast networks. So again, we appreciate you tuning in. And if there's ever anything that Jason or I can do to help you in your church, make sure that you reach out. We always include a link in our show notes and on our YouTube channel with a direct link on how you can schedule an appointment to talk to one of us or one of our coaches about church communications needs, church marketing, church media needs. We would love to be able to help you and serve your church. So I think that's a good enough intro for this podcast. Ben's got tons and tons of stuff to share with us today. So we appreciate you tuning in. Here's our interview with Ben Stapley. Ben Stapley, thanks so much for joining Jason and me on the podcast today.
Bart and Jason, great to be with you guys. Excited to be talking about all things Easter.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited about this conversation. At the time that this episode comes out, Easter is probably not on the forefront of most church leaders' minds. They're probably still recovering from Christmas, but we definitely want to start to grease the wheels for Easter. And so we've got a lot of stuff that we want to talk about today, a lot of questions that we want to ask you about in terms of your experience planning Easter services and how churches can leverage that for more significant impact in their community. But before we get to the topic at hand, we'd love to have you just share a little bit of your story, your background, how you ended up in ministry, and how you ended up doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, first of all, again, I love what you guys are doing at Missional Marketing. The idea that churches would need marketing when I jumped into ministry, that was pretty novel. And a lot of churches weren't thinking that way. So to rewind the clock, I've been in ministry for about 17 years, but before that, I was in television as a producer. And I wanted to take those skill sets of creating an experience that would help draw people in to an important message. And I wanted to be able to take that and extrapolate that and bring it into a church world and bring it into the ministry world. And so I actually started my professional career as a television producer in Canada, and then came down to the States and jumped into ministry and been involved in ministry ever since then for the past 17 years. And my desire ultimately is to do that, is to, how do I create experiences that bring people who are far from God closer to Him? And then ultimately, how do they then, after they have crossed the line, how do they bring people into those experiences as well and introduce their friends and family? And how do we ultimately share the good news in the gospel? So that's a quick synopsis. I was in Jersey for the first 14 years of my ministry, working for some churches there. And then the past 3 years, I have been in Miami, working at Christ Fellowship Miami. And then just recently, as in 2 months ago, bounced back up to New Jersey. My wife and I felt called to be close to family and friends in this area, and we looked for a great church to partner with to accomplish that. And so I'm now the executive pastor at TLCC, the Life Christian Church in West Orange, New Jersey. So that's a quick snapshot of where I've come from and how God's used some of that background of my own in terms of marketing His gospel, in the lack of a better term, to connect more people to Him.
I have a question for you. When you started in Jersey, or at some point in Jersey, were you serving on staff at Liquid Church?
Yes, I was a creative arts pastor there for about 4 years.
Okay, I'm connecting some dots here. Were you at Liquid Church when Liquid Church did a series called Home Run Faith?
Yes.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm a big baseball fan. And I remember, I think it could have actually been you that I reached out to. I reached out to somebody at Liquid on the creative team because you guys had produced little baseball cards for like Peter and Paul and Timothy and Stephen, and then taught on each of those guys. And I basically completely ripped off that sermon series. And I reached out to you guys and I said, hey, can I have all of the creative? And somebody, it might have even been you, sent it all to me. And I printed little baseball cards and I used the bumper video and the whole 9 yards. So whatever part you played in Home Run Faith, you blessed me and my church family. That's probably 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. It's been a while, but when you said Jersey, I was like, I'm pretty sure you were on staff at Liquid. So yeah,
Bart,
interesting.
as they say, good artists copy, but great artists steal. So I'm glad that you stole from us to accomplish God's mission at your church.
Is it really stealing if I called and asked for permission?
That axiom probably is not the most accurate in your situation. Accurate. That is correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. I did reach out and say, hey, please give me all your stuff. And somebody on the Liquid staff said, sure, take it and run with it. So it was awesome. Hey, so thanks for kind of giving us the rundown there on your background and where you are and what you're doing in ministry. One of the things that you said offline before we started recording was, you've done Christmas and Easter, what'd you say, 17 times as a
going into my 18th year at this point.
Yeah,
yes.
18 years. And those of us who have been in ministry, we can relate to that. Christmas and Easter come every year. As you kind of transitioned from television production and into the church space and began to kind of cross-pollinate using your gifts and your talents and your experiences from the broadcast world into the church world, and as you've developed your own skill set in terms of church leadership, what are some of the things that you've learned that have helped you plan great Christmas and Easter experiences?
Great question. For me, and this isn't just, and I'm going to go back into my toolbox in terms of thinking about big shows and coming from a television perspective. Time. There's the old adage, do you want it quick, cheap, or good? You can pick two. And oftentimes churches will skimp on they want it fast. So, give it to me as quickly as possible. Yeah. And so when it comes to Christmas and Easter, a lot of churches do decent with planning Christmas because they'll plan it in, hey, we got Christmas in July. We got 6-month lead in. There's a down season. We can spend some time thinking about that. Most churches do that well. If you're not, I encourage you towards it, because if you don't plan it in the summer, the fall hits and then things are just crazy from there on out. The problem is, because of how the calendar hits, you can give about a 6-month lead into Christmas. But even the fact that we're talking about this now, I got a feeling, and guilty as charged, that a lot of churches have not spoken about Easter at all yet. And so then you usually have a 3-month or 2-month, kind of depending on when it lands on the calendar, run going into Easter. And you're also coming on the heels, running on fumes from Christmas, and you're going into the new year. So that's probably the biggest thing. It's just try to give yourself as much planning and try to get that Easter planning in around Thanksgiving, getting it started then. And then I found, working with a lot of lead pastors, is they're going to approach Easter and Christmas based upon how they're wired, either in two different ways. They're either going to approach it with, they got strong direction. This is what I want us to do. Or they don't know what they want, and they're going to pass that responsibility off to their creative director, their arts programmer, whatever the title is. And they're going to say, you pitch me 1 or 2 ideas, and I'm going to give you feedback. The biggest tension, what I've seen with churches, is when they don't have that clarity with how the lead pastor is wired and then map out the work accordingly, where it's people waiting around for the vision from the lead pastor. And he's like, I was never going to give this to you. You're the creative ones. You tell me what you want to do. Or vice versa. The team spent a lot of energy ideating and doing mood boards and conceptualizing things. And then they pitch it. And he's like, no. I know exactly what I want to do. Why did you give me this whole PowerPoint presentation on your plan? We've wasted a lot of energy. So figure out how your lead pastor is wired and then go from there. And then probably the last thing, just planning those big events, is brainstorming. I've been a part of, and I've led fruitless brainstorming sessions. So how do you not, after you get an understanding of who's running the show and who's taking point, is it your lead pastor or is it your creative director? After you figure that out, how do they then they get the right people into the meetings, get the right ideas from them, document them accordingly, take the needed action steps on them? Like there's a whole process to that I've seen a lot of organizations in general, but churches in particular, kind of do a bad job, that they waste time. They don't have the right people in the room. They're shooting down ideas just because they're thinking about budget, and they're like, that's not practical. And they don't have anything inspirational. So those are probably the biggest things that I would say as you plan out your big holidays. Think through those things. Give yourself time, give yourself directions, and give yourself very productive brainstorming meetings.
When would you start Easter planning?
November. I kind of like the latest. October, November, I think is a good time for that. Any earlier, and you're bumping into your Christmas planning, and any later, and you're getting to now your executing phase. November, December are really your executing phase for December, and you're kind of running into that. So I think that best window, not November, is actually around October. But that's me, Jason. I know you've got great ideas as well. Counter.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying when would you suggest that?
Well, I probably agree with that, because it's not a surprise, and it's not like you can't be thinking about something that's going to be months away when you have a huge event happening in a month or two, Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. But I think you're absolutely right. And it's the idea of making sure you've got the right people at the table with plenty of time for brainstorming. I mean, we know what the message is, but how we're going to wrap that up is really important. I also think the big miss for churches is they don't think about what happens after the fact, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of your new timers, you're what I call the CEOs, the Christmas and Easter onlys. What's going to bring them back? Well, it's going to bring them back in January because they had a really good experience at Christmas. So what's going to bring them back the rest of April, May, June, because they experienced something in April, at Easter? What did you think about after the fact? I think sometimes we just focus on just that main event. We forget, oh, wait, what if they want to come back? What do we have to offer them? Your thoughts?
I agree. I like to aim for 50-50. So 50% of our effort is going to go towards Christmas at large, but 50% of our energy should go towards I call it our callback series. What are we calling people back towards?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Christmas always overshadows everything, and it's never a 50-50. It's kind of 75-25 or maybe 80-20. But at least you've spent 80% of your creative juices on that instead of just, oh gosh, we got nothing. First of the year, it's a guest speaker and they're speaking on something completely untethered with where we are going for the rest of the year. And it's a standalone message, and it's really a wasted opportunity. And then you stand up from that big full room on Christmas. We're so glad you're here. Come back next week when the youth pastor's preaching. It's not the most, no offense to youth pastors. I did it for 6 months. That's all I could take. But so we're joking about that, but you're right there that, you can't just spend all this energy getting people out the first time. What is the sticking factor that they're going to come back the second time?
Yeah, we a couple of times at the church we went to, we would there'd be a Christmas Eve, and they would usually give some kind of a gift. One year, I remember we gave a book, and we had that author of that book that was going to show up in February. We were going to have a series on it in January and February, and he was going to finish it. And I thought, what a great way to connect what's happening right now with new people and bringing them back. And so just when you just got to think through that stuff, right? It's just, sometimes a lot of churches we talk to them, I always ask that question, what are you doing after the fact? That's a good question. We don't know.
Yeah. I would add to your timeline there. You both kind of made me realize this, that when we have our team together late summer, early fall, and we begin the creative process of thinking through Christmas, we're already in a pretty highly creative mode. In fact, hopefully your staff has had an opportunity through the summer to unplug a little bit, and they're coming back to the fall with a new energy and excitement. And it is a good time in that same window to have some brainstorming conversations about Easter, because we all know that the staff pushes so hard through the holidays that by the time they come back from January, the tank is typically not full. It typically is a time where we've kind of spent everything that we had. Now we've got this ready, set, be creative, ready, set, say something funny. Like, it doesn't work that way. Creativity does come in ebbs and flows and seasons, but I'm a firm believer that the staff has to be rested and energized and have the margin to be able to be creative and think about creativity. So I think that's a very interesting perspective to say, hey, what if you, as you're beginning the execution of your Christmas, start dreaming, planning, thinking about, what were the plans that you had for Christmas that ended up on the cutting room floor? And is there any way that some of those can actually be implemented for Easter? And can we actually think that far ahead? Not that we need to act on any of them between, October and December, but if we already have a dry erase board with some key points on it when we hit the planning stages in mid-January after we've come back to the new year, we've already got a little bit of runway in front of us and some things that we can build off of. So I think that's interesting. So you talked about brainstorming, Ben, and I remember as a creative director at a church, sitting in creative planning meetings with my team, and we had a few staff people and a few lay people who would sit and do these brainstorming sessions. And our first brainstorming sessions, we operated on a no logistics policy, meaning if someone came up with a great idea, we were not allowed in that first meeting to discuss the logistics, because, I'm sitting there as the creative director and someone says, well, we should get a Black Hawk helicopter and come land it in the back parking lot of the building to make this sermon illustration. And all I'm thinking is, I'm never going to be able to pull that off. And in those first meetings, we're not allowed to do that, right? It's total umbrella of grace. And so sometimes brainstorming can lead to really great results. Sometimes brainstorming can lead a team down doing some really silly and goofy things that maybe didn't execute the way that we thought they would. Do you have any good stories, or at least examples of brainstorming and experiments, innovations that went wrong, the things that didn't go the way that you planned and hoped?
Can I at least start with something that went right before I went to the wrong? I love that. Yes, I will.
Yeah, of course.
When it comes to brainstorming, like you just hit on two things that you might be planning. Whatever you're planning, sometimes we have the horse blinders on, like Christmas, 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 and we come up with a great idea, and they're like, forget about it. That doesn't work for Christmas. It's not an elf. It's not a holiday font. It won't work. And then we lose that idea. And I always say, like, we gotta capture these additional ideas, so we just put it in that miscellaneous, and we can come back to. And then another thing, just in terms of like what works really well, is there are more creative people in your organization, especially if people are listening that's not a church, outside of your staff, and then outside of the people who are typically in your creative fields. And so think through who those people are and be pretty open-handed with who gets an invitation to the table, because you don't want to just, this person's not a creative. Sometimes I've had people who are bankers, engineers, accountant, people who are more in those fields, but they're great ideators. So don't, be pretty open-handed with you, let you come to the table. In terms of things that have not worked for me, especially in relationship to, we're in the Christmas season, I've seen a lot of churches, myself included, be just an overload. So we have the Christmas series. We're coming from a marketing standpoint too. We're launching a Christmas series. We have Christmas shows sometime in that final week. We have our Christmas Eve service. We have our year-end service. And at some point, the average guest who's coming there once a month has no idea what is the most important thing. And so I'm not saying, I am saying two things. Try to streamline some of your experiences and don't just have this huge smorgasbord that people aren't going to be coming to. And that's one option. The other option is to streamline your communication. So at the end of the day, if I can only come to one experience and you want me to invite someone to come with me for that, what is that thing? Is it when you launch the Christmas series in December? Is it your Christmas show? Is it your Christmas Eve service on the 24th? What is that one thing? And hammer that. And also, we have additional opportunities, yada, yada. But I think I've seen that happen in a lot of churches where there's not clarity in terms of what takes precedence. I've done this as well. I've gone too avant-garde for holiday services, like a Easter or a Christmas, especially Christmas. People want the classics. They want you to play the hits. Like when you got an old rock band and they, from the 70s, you want them to play the hits. Play the hits. Play what we know. Don't pull your new album. I really don't care what you did last year. I want what got you famous. And so when it comes to our holiday services, I think sometimes, especially at the creative side, we want to get avant-garde, and then we just lose people. So avoid that if possible. And then probably like the worst thing is, again, I'm saying this in hope and faith. We just finished Christmas season, but nothing ruins a Christmas experience like the smell of burnt hair. Those candlelight services can go pretty askew pretty quick. I've been a part of that, and also where we didn't test the fire alarm system, and 1,000 people blew out a candle at the same time, and the smoke went up, and then now we're all in the parking lot for 30 minutes as the fire marshal comes and he shuts us down because we're not in zone compliance. So those are some of the ways that brainstorming has gone askew for me in terms of its application over the years.
The Christmas fail.
I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in to the Missional Marketing Podcast. It's always our goal to help you as a church leader leverage your communications and digital media resources to reach more people for Jesus. One of the ways that we help churches do that is through creating social media content from your Sunday sermon videos. Specifically, what we can do for you is to create short sermon snippets from 30 seconds long to 5 minutes long, capturing those mic drop moments that you really want people to remember. We edit the videos, add captions, add your church branding, and then you or we post them to your social media channels. As a pastor, I always love to see my sermon content live on beyond the Sundays, and I know that's what you value for your sermons too. We offer this service as a monthly subscription, but we've got a 6-week trial that gives you a chance to see how it works. If you'd like more information, just shoot me an email at bblair@missionalmarketing.com. I'd be glad to meet with you, explain the process, and answer any questions that you have. Once again, thanks for tuning into our podcast. Let's get back to the interview.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think we church people, we get so hung up on, we can't do that. We did that last year. Nobody remembers it. They don't even remember what you did a month ago. So, we had to remind ourselves, okay, it's okay to repeat things. In fact, it's probably better that we repeat it. Right. And so we would have some of those experiences. So I think that's another thing is just don't be focused on your people, but be focused on those people that maybe coming to church for the first time, right? And it's maybe they're checking you out online, and just make sure you have clarity into what you're about and what to expect, and then next steps would be my.
That's really good, Jason. I actually learned a lesson about this from an unchurched neighbor when I was the creative arts director at this church in the Toronto area. There was another church near us that was growing very rapidly, a very gifted senior communicator, and they had a bit of buzz in the community because the church was fast growing, and they had a really gifted preacher. And one of my unchurched neighbors, he and his wife went to their service for Easter, and he told me that he was really disappointed because he doesn't go to church very often, and he went to church on Easter, and the pastor did not preach on the Easter story. He couldn't explain to me exactly what it was that the pastor preached on. It was some guy named Paul and some story, and he didn't really know. And I kind of looked into it, and I was like, well, they were in a teaching series, and they didn't break the teaching series for Easter Sunday. They actually just continued on in whatever epistle they were working through. And I thought that was an eye-opening moment for me, because I thought, I too like to push the envelope of creativity and do things that are sort of out of the box. But I realized that when it comes to Christmas and Easter, there is sort of a baseline expectation that people have that when they show up to church, that they're going to get a Christmas message at Easter, or a Christmas message at Christmas and an Easter message at Christmas. Don't get those two mixed up. Don't do Easter on Christmas and Christmas on Easter. But that was one of the lessons that I learned just from having a conversation with a neighbor that wasn't really interested in church, but for some reason he decided to go on Easter, hoping to hear the Easter story, and he didn't get the Easter story. So that was a lesson learned.
So hey, Ben, what are some of the experiences that have gone really, really well that come to mind?
It used to be, it's funny, a lot of the experiences, I used to view it through what's a success and what's a win, and what's that check mark, and did we accomplish what we wanted? I usually evaluated that through the destination, through the lens of the destination. Did we get to where we wanted? So in other words, did we have some great experience? Did we did environmental, I remember maybe 10 years ago, environmental projection. It was big for me, my church at the time. And we felt great. We did this wow moment for people. I've done the interior snow, hey, like during the last chorus and the snow's coming down, like, man, that's a wow. And there's experiences on the destination side that I thought that was well. Also from like the destination, like the marketing, I've done like cool ideas, like, hey, if we were able to, there's this new thing called Uber, and what happens if we were to, like, if people can't come and we gift them a free voucher to our destinations? We figure out with Uber, like, they're not just grabbing a ride to the mall, but it's only to one of our destinations. We figured out some of those fun things as well. But over time, it's been less destination for me, and it's been more journey. And what I mean by that is the process leading up to it. I've been a part of churches as a staff member and as a volunteer where everyone dreaded Christmas. Everyone dreaded Easter. And because the planning was so poor and last minute, and the teamwork was not good, there was a lack of vision, or the expectations. The expectations and reality in terms of what your budget was and what we're trying to do is just so off, and everyone felt like I'm busting my hump here, and it's not enough. And so when you ask me what's something I'm proud at when I look back on, it's times when I took the journey more serious, and I took the time with the staff and the volunteers to lead that through them, keep the vision front and center, and the experience in the background. I think those have been the most rewarding holiday seasons for me, where I can look back and say, I don't even remember what the experience was. I don't remember what we were preaching on. It may have been Paul. I don't know. But I do know everyone participating leading up to it felt honored, and they realized who they were honoring. It wasn't the lead pastor's expectation to double attendance this year. They kept everything front and center, and the results were secondary after that. So I think that's where I've changed, probably maybe in the last 5 years. I kind of probably wish I would have changed it 10 years ago in terms of what I thought was a win come the holiday seasons.
Let's talk a minute about Easter specifically. We've really talked a lot about, I think, just the big event planning that kind of comes around Christmas and Easter. But let's look ahead to Easter of 2022. The landscape in the church has changed. 2020 brought a unique opportunity for churches at Easter. 2021, there was still sort of this trying to figure out how to do Easter. 2022, new season, new opportunities. So what do you see as you look ahead, some of the best opportunities for churches this Easter for both online and their in-person experiences?
There's a great question. I love how you're saying it's online and on site. I think there may have been a pendulum swing. There definitely was a pendulum swing when it was pretty much all on site, and then we went all online, and then we're trying to figure out our way and navigate somewhere in between. And some churches have kind of thrown out the baby with the bathwater and kind of forgotten or neglected online because they're finally on site again. And so encouraging us, hey, how do we do this well, is super helpful. Bart, thank you for that. One of the things I'm a big fan of, some of this may be low-hanging fruit for some of your listeners, but I'm trying to give everyone actionable steps. But photo booths are great. They're low investment in terms of setting up a fern. I'm thinking of between two ferns. It's probably not the best comparison. Some plants that you're beside, and a pastel color behind you guys, and you got a photo booth ready to go. And as people come into Easter, there's probably one service that mom can manipulate you towards. Maybe outside Mother's Day, it might be Easter. Everyone's dressed up well. And the nice thing about that is the photo booth gives you an on-site and online presence. Because on-site, it's an activity, something for people to do. And then online, hopefully they're going to take that photo, and hopefully you've communicated in your lead up to Easter that, hey, this is, as you're here, take a photo of yourself, hashtag it, generic church name, Easter, or Easter at your generic church name, whatever it might be. Make sure that hashtag, no one else is using it. There's a lot of, Christ Church out there, or Community Church of the Valley, and so just make sure before you put out that hashtag. It's funny, we had another church, Christ Fellowship, that was bigger, probably bigger than us, and so they would always use Christmas at CF, and so we had to change it to Christmas with CF. So just make sure that hashtag that you are promoting, someone else more prominent isn't squatting on that, and also make sure that it's not inappropriate. Sometimes those hashtags can lead you down a rabbit trail you don't want to go down. So photo booth is great. We recently invested in GIFs. They were really helpful for us, and especially on Instagram, people searching for that. A lot of people nowadays don't post content to their feed. They're going to post, I don't want to lock myself in, and this is a post that anyone can see forever. I want to put something out there more ethereal and more temporal, and so I'm going to put it out on my stories. And so we try to leverage content for stories for that reason. GIFs are a great way to do that. And for half your audience that is thinking I'm pronouncing it wrong, no, I'm not. It's GIFs. So leverage those as well. Some other low-hanging fruit from a marketing standpoint, because I know, hey, missional marketing, hey, how do we do that well? I'm a big fan of the Facebook frame. I'm a big fan of that you can get that, you can brand that, you can ask your people to do it. People, when they go into their profile, they see that there as well. And then probably the biggest one, I'm saying our last, because it's the biggest, is share content. So as two examples, I'll give one from my former church, my current church. But if you go to cfmiami.org/share, or you go to tlcc.org/share, those are two examples of how two great churches are providing shareable content. Because at the end of the day, I don't want just my church to post content about what God is doing in and through us. I want to be able to raise up digital evangelists and say, here are the tools that you can go forward and you can communicate what God is doing in you and through you. And so those are two great examples where we just give shareable content to our people for them to send that digital invite to a friend to invite them to church with them, or for them to post it on their social media. So that's like low hanging fruit from a marketing standpoint as we're jumping in. I got more, but I don't know if you want to touch on that before we kind of pivot off some marketing stuff.
Well, everything you're saying, I think churches, you have to do a good job of that. I think we also miss the opportunity to utilize Google and making sure you're putting invitations in there as well, digital invitations where you're recording a message to invite people to church. Obviously, I think, I mean, this is true. We want the best way to grow your church is your own people, right? To really encourage them to invite and bring their friends and families and neighbors. But as a church, we can support that through all kinds of different digital ads that you can do. So, all that stuff you're talking about is spot on in terms of allowing the church body to be the church body and to help bring and grow that. Another church that we're working with, it's kind of cool because I think there's a lot of times a way to connect with people isn't necessarily, it's inviting them to church, but maybe there's a first step where you're giving them some, free stuff, right? And you're connecting with them. A church we're working with this Christmas is doing it's like an experience kit. You can download this free kit. It's got stuff like recipes and activities for kids and places to go. And it's just kind of a cool giveaway. And I think sometimes I like the creativity and all that. And that takes time, takes planning. You can't just whip that out in a day. you have to plan for that. But definitely utilizing the digital platforms to engage people is something that you really want to go all out when it comes to Christmas and Easter, in my opinion.
And Jason, let me piggyback off that. You talked about something. It's almost a throwaway comment, but I think almost like the crux of this whole conversation is empowering our people, and how do we help them be the church instead of just professionalizing it, that we have a staff that does that. And two ways that I've seen that be super impactful is I no longer do campaigns or communications where I'm asking somebody to attend a service, especially if they're internal, they're already there.
Right.
My assumption is, and I think their assumption as well, they're going to be here. So we want you to come. I've foregone that. I've seeded that as a taken. My action step is not come, but it's invite. Yep. It's invite. And so as you're going into your Easter services, churches and leaders and communication directors, do not think about how you're asking people to attend. Assume that. Ask them to do one action step. Who are you inviting to come with you this holiday season? And to help you do that, I've seen a lot of churches reward that on the front end. We all know what gets rewarded gets repeated. And so find a story. I'm sure there's somebody in your church who is now attending your church, and hopefully they found Christ because the first time they came was an Easter story. Find that story and tell that story leading into your Easter season. That will be, if there's kind of nothing else you take from this podcast, that's the one thing that I would say you do, and you're going to get the highest ROI in that. You may not be a church that has the resources where you can say, hey, we're gonna sit them down. We got a videographer. We're gonna kind of do this right. Even if you don't have the resources to that, and some people might be listening, we got a church of 100 people. That's great. You can don't let that hold you from this opportunity. Yeah. Bring them on stage during your announcement time, whatever it is, even in a message. Hey, we're going into the Christmas season, or Christmas. We're coming out of the Christmas season. We're going into the Easter season, and we've been asking you to invite people. Why? Why should we do this? Why should we do this? So we get more people. We get a bigger budget. No, the reason why is because of Sally. I'm going to bring Sally on stage, and she's going to tell you how and then you let her tell her story live on stage. And that, to me, that's one of the biggest wins, when you see that fruit and you empower your people accordingly.
It's all about change lives, right? And God's in that business, and so that should be really fruitful for your church. You should see some of that evidence. If you don't, different conversation, right?
You might be in the wrong business.
The other thing I think is really important, and I think we can overlook this, is people want to share their experience when they've had a phenomenal experience. Mm-hmm. So if I've gone to a restaurant, I'm like, in fact, I have. We found this restaurant. I'm in Phoenix. It's kind of South Phoenix. The building is old. It's kind of in a rundown place, but the food is amazing. Mm-hmm. And so we've looked past those warts, if you will, because the experience of the food is unbelievable, right? And so you might be in an old building in a church, right? You're not going to have the budget or whatever to fix everything up and paint it. But boy, there better be an amazing experience from the first greeter all the way through to the end. And you can control that, church. That doesn't have to be, you have to have, well, look at that church down the road that's got a $10 million building. That's just a building, right? It's the experience. And you want your people to be proud to bring their friends and family and neighbors because they know they're going to have a great personal experience at your church. And that's stuff we can control. And I think sometimes we overlook that. Just, we say, I don't really want to bring them because I'm embarrassed by so-and-so. Well, if your people are saying that, eliminate it, right? Figure out a solution to that problem.
Jason, I don't know if you ever read the book Power of Moments, where they talk about what people remember. And oftentimes we think that let's just make this whole thing kind of maybe level 8, because we want the whole thing on level 8.
Yeah.
But what psychologists have realized that people remember 2 things from an event. They remember the peak moment, whatever the highest part was, they remember that, and they remember how it ends. Generally speaking, the rest kind of washes away. So as we're nonprofit, limited resources, so what are we going to do? Instead of if a church is like, their experience is 5, and you're going into Easter, instead of trying to raise everything to an 8, what I encourage churches to do is think, no, how can you end on a 9, and what's another peak moment that can be a 9? As well, that people will remember. Maybe you're going to hire a vocalist that can really sing a song, and it's going to move people to tears. It's going to help them connect with the larger cost of the gospel. Maybe it's a video that you're producing that is, you're probably not flying out the team to Israel, but you're doing something that is, you're going to invest a little bit more there. What's a peak moment you can invest in, and what's a concluding moment? And then for myself, the way I envision this, even going into the event, I like to use the axiom, people capture what captivates. So whenever you're at an event, right? And whenever in church and I see people pull up their phones, I'm like, yes, we did it. We created a moment. People are capturing it because it's captivating to them for some reason. Yeah. Maybe it's because their son is the one who's playing guitar, or their little daughters, maybe it's grandma doing it. It may be that. But if there's more than one phone and it's not the same people in the row of the family up front, then that moment has captivated people. So as you're planning your Easter services, think that through. Is there a moment in which we would envision people would kind of do one of these? And you might be in a church that's very liturgical, and like that is kind of anathema, and we don't want that. But so maybe the experience isn't even in your auditorium or your sanctuary. Maybe it's out in your lobby. Maybe it's you got an Easter bunny, and he's giving kids candy on the way in, and they would love to hug him and take a photo with him. Maybe it's your greeter team that they have banners and they're holding that up as people are coming in. What is that moment that's going to captivate people so much that they're going to want to capture it with their phones?
So since I've been in the Phoenix for 25 years and being involved working at a church for a long, long time, my favorite all-time Easter experience, this is a little over the top, so I'm not saying you have to do this, but we turned our entire worship center into a casino.
Tell me more.
That needs a little unpacking.
Tell me more. Are you willing to gamble your life on what was the hook? How'd you guys pivot it?
The theme was the stakes are high.
Okay, there we go. I should have gone that. That's a good one.
It was amazing. In fact, our lead pastor steps out and he's a dealer. He's a blackjack.
Was he dressed? The suspenders?
We had blackjack tables. We had slot machines. Our invitations were playing cards.
Yeah.
Okay. And he literally laid it out to say you are betting on something. Mm-hmm. Even if you say you're not betting, that's your bet. Mm-hmm. Right. So he went through the whole thing. It was amazing. And then as people left, we gave him a chip. And said, this is your chip. This is your life. This is your chip. What are you placing your bet on? So you don't have to go that extreme, but it was the most amazing Easter experience, because people to this day go, I totally remember that. I mean, that thing stuck in my head, and he really got to me.
And I still have that chip sitting on my shelf.
I still have the chip in my office here.
Yeah. There's something if you can make it tangible. A lot of churches will do this. Hey, we'll get the railroad nails and we'll kind of give those Good Friday. What's the price to pay? You can get highly creative with that. But if there's some way that your message is tethered, if something cognitive is tethered to something physical, then it's the staying power, the memorableness of it, and people taking steps on it, and their lives being changed, not just for a moment, but for a whole lifetime. It increases when you're able to give that physical tether to it.
That's right. Now, so let me ask you real quick, where would you go to get your your ideas? Would you look at other churches? I mean, how did you generate?
You want the truth? So the truth is we copy off each other. We all see what, it's terrible, but I can tell you right now, like what most churches are going to be doing for Easter, it's whatever Hillsong and Elevation did last year. And they're going to watch their experiences and rip, and pull them off.
Why not?
And that is, I say it's terrible. It's not terrible. There's beauty there. There's creativity there. There's, again, limited nonprofit with resources. So how do we do that? That being said, I try to take those blinders off, and I try not to just swim in the cultural and creative circles within Christendom, but I try to push my consumption beyond that to come in with ideas outside of myself. Being in the Northeast, there's tons of great museums that I'm able to walk around, and all my cultural references aren't just pop culture as well, and they feel pretty dated within even that. You used to have pop culture references like a decade ago where we all watched this, season finale of Friends or Seinfeld. That is gone. So even within pop culture, I'm going to rabbit trailing here, but even our ability to get everyone on the same page because we all watched the episode of such and such last night, that is not even there. So I push myself out of Christendom, and I try to push myself out of pop culture, which I'm normally swimming in those waters primarily, so that I'm not just ripping off somebody else. That God's creativity is flowing through me afresh, and that I'm tethering it to something deeper and more foundational than whatever the hottest trend is now. So I don't know if that's answered your questions. Those are some principles that lead me, and I try to lead my teams as well to be consuming stuff outside of just Christendom itself.
Well, Ben, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I actually could have ended it a few minutes ago when you said something. I'm gonna restate what you said that I thought actually is the golden nugget of this podcast, and then we're gonna wrap it up. But you talked about, from a marketing standpoint, especially relating to the people who are already part of your church family, that your primary message to them is invite. You and Jason both talked about the real strength in your church's ability to reach people who are far from God and reach people in the community. The real strength is the people who are already sitting in the seats there on a regular basis Sunday morning, the people who have already rolled up their sleeves and they're serving and they're committed to your church. And so I just wanted to rewind and kind of hit on that a little bit more because I think there can be a tendency for us in the context of the church to overemphasize the invite for our own people and underemphasize the fact that we're preparing this meal for people who haven't yet had a chance to try it. Going back to Jason's restaurant analogy, you go and you have a great experience, and it's what makes you want to come back. And if the chef and the kitchen staff were only preparing a meal that met their standards and it was what they liked, and they just kept it to themselves, that a whole lot of other people would miss out on the opportunity to share in that great meal and that great dining experience. And so as a church family, we want to remember that we're not doing this just for the people who are already a part of our church, but we're really doing this to try to expand our gospel footprint in the community that God has called us to reach. And so I wanted to kind of land the plane on that, but now Jason's going to take the plane off again.
I'm just going to say it isn't just always invite. Like this restaurant I'm talking about, we've invited and brought 3 different times because the food was so good. Same thing with church. You don't just invite, you invite and bring. Plan it together, go together, right? Make that a thing with your neighbors or whoever it might be. So that's just
Absolutely. Well, Ben, part of the reason that you and I connected and I wanted to reach out with you and have this conversation today was because of a lot of resources that you have available online. You have a blog post specifically designed to help people plan their Easter experience or an Easter online experience. You have a lot of resources and a lot of content online. Can you just share for a minute for our audience what you have available for people and how people can reach out to you, find out more about what you're doing, and maybe be blessed by the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, you can follow me on the major social media platforms under Ben Stapley. I think I'm squatting on all of them right now. And but if you wanted to find out more about my blog, you can go to benstapley.com. Or as you said, Bart, I've helped a number of churches. We've talked about all these ideas, right? But sometimes churches have a desire towards it, but maybe lack of leadership. Maybe the lead pastor doesn't have the time, and they don't have somebody internal to really help them plan these experiences well. And I've come along to a lot of churches and helped them plan holiday services. So you can go to planeaster.com, and I would love to partner with you as well if that's a benefit for people as they're looking towards this holiday season.
Yeah.
Ben, thanks again. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to hang out with us. And we're trusting that people will reach out to you and at the very least read the content that you have on your websites and be blessed by that. And we have been. It's been a great conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.